My name's Todd Geist, and you're here at JavaScript is Eating the World. I hope that most of you know who I am, at least heard of me a little bit. I'm the founder and CEO of Geist Interactive. We're a Southern California FileMaker development company. I also founded One Spark Academy with my wife, and that's a nonprofit learning center in Thousand Oaks, California. We provide alternative education for middle school age kids. There's my contact information. You can usually find me anywhere on the internet under Todd Geist. I've got most of the properties, most of the internet properties with Todd Geist there. So I really liked the way Andy led off about purpose last night in the keynote, because that impacts a lot of what we do. We founded One Spark, which is a nonprofit, as I said. It's a middle school age alternative learning center for kids who essentially opt out of public ed and they agree to be homeschooled, and they come to us and we school them. And that has provided a tremendous amount of joy to me. It's been great to be able to be a part of getting that school up and running. And we're starting our sixth year this fall, sixth year. We've had a couple hundred kids go through our program. Happy kids, happy parents, happy teachers, and it's been really great. And I always talk about it because many of you in the audience have supported us in the past with donations, and I just want to say thank you for doing that. And for those of you who haven't, there's a link up there. You can go and join up. You can donate $5 a month, $10 a month, or a $100 donation, whatever you like. But it's really going to a good cause. So that's what we do in the nonprofit world. In the business world, we have another purpose, and that's custom apps. So I really love the theme this year because that's always been the heart of what I've always done since I picked up FileMaker, and even before that, HyperCard, back in like 1990. And so it's always been about custom apps for me. And we think that companies and organizations have a right to custom software. I use the word right because I think it's a shame that people are forced to use things that are off the shelf because they don't know how or because they can't afford to get things that work for their business. And in order to be able to provide custom software, custom applications for small to medium-sized businesses, we need a rich platform and a really rich ecosystem. And so we support that with consulting, development, products and training, because it takes all of that. It takes a community to be able to build things in a way that, that can really provide value to that range of customer. And so that's our purpose at Geist Interactive. To serve that, we have some products. Barcode Creator won the FBA award a couple years ago. FMQBO connects QuickBooks to FileMaker, QuickBooks Online. GoDraw is a drawing app for FileMaker. GoSign does some advanced signature capture. And FM Perception, if you haven't seen that yet, come by the booth and check it out. It's our new analysis application for doing really fast, really quick analysis of your database so you can find out information right away about what's in your database or what isn't in terms of the code. Not the data, but the code. Where are those variables, fields, et cetera. All right, so the title for this talk is JavaScript is Eating the World. However, that was not the original title. The original title was Custom Web Publishing with Node.js. And Mark Baum thought that was a really, really boring title. So he asked me to come up with another one, and so I jokingly said, okay, how about JavaScript is Eating the World? And he said, okay, I guess I asked for it. And so that's where we're at. So this is actually a quote that came out a few years ago and kind of kicked around the internet like a meme. It's actually a paraphrasing of an earlier quote by Mark Andreessen, the venture capitalist and early browser guy. He said software is eating the world. About 7 or 8 years ago or 6 years ago, he said, software is eating the world. It's going to get into every aspect of our lives, personal, business, whatever. And if any of you have seen the video of the absolute pandemonium that occurs in Central Park when a rare Pokemon shows up, we know that it's happening. I mean, software is all these people running around Central Park like this. It's everywhere. So this guy's point was that JavaScript is really the sort of leading edge of that front. That JavaScript is really the thing that is eating the world. And so that's kind of what I'd like to tell you about today. And during this talk, we're going to move really fast. Another quote, Mark Zuckerberg. He's actually backed off this a little bit, but this was kind of their MO for the first half dozen years of their company. Just move fast and break things. And that's what I intend to do during this session, and I really hope I survive. We're going to do just 15 minutes of slides, and then I'm going to get into live coding. We're just going to do JavaScript up here. I'm going to do as little copy and paste as I can. And we're going to build a bunch of stuff and see how it comes out. And then I hope we'll have about 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. And because I've got so much material, if you could hold your questions to the end, that would be really, really great. Backwards. Okay, so again, FileMaker is the core of what we do. So we're not going to see a lot of FileMaker today. FileMaker Server is in the background here. It's running on my laptop, and we've got a FileMaker file that we're going to be talking to. But we're not going to look at it. I mean, we'll see the layouts, we'll see the data, but we're not going to see any fields or calcs or scripts in there. We're going to be looking at all JavaScript. But still, it's all in service of FileMaker. FileMaker is the core of what we do. The cool thing is that JavaScript works really, really well with FileMaker. And I want to point out, there's something interesting about JavaScript to me. I got fascinated with it a few years ago and just sort of went back and traced the history of it. And it started out as almost this joke. I mean, Brendan and I created it in 10 days in 1995. He had a bunch of experience with other computer programming languages. It turns out HyperCard was actually one of the influences of the early JavaScript. And there were others. But he had 10 days to get something into the browser. Netscape had just signed a deal with Sun, who had just shipped Java, and so it got named JavaScript. It has nothing to do with Java. So if anybody still thinks that, please rest assured, it's not Java. It's much, much easier. It gets put into all browsers, and then Microsoft, who has a really profitable desktop monopoly, doesn't really want much to do with it. And so they just kind of take over the browser market and then step on it, and basically nothing happens for 10 years. There was Flash. We all know the history of Flash, but something that many people don't know is it came within like a single meeting of becoming the third version of JavaScript. So they almost replaced JavaScript with Flash, but it didn't happen, and now we have JavaScript still. Key moments. Douglas Crockford discovers, invents, specifies JSON in 2001. That's some JSON there on the slide. It looks like a data transport format. It is a data transport format, but that is also valid JavaScript right there. That is a JavaScript object, and JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. In 2005, we have Web 2.0, and this was when all of a sudden web pages would refresh without going back to the browser. That was the big breakthrough there. And that came through something called Ajax, which was enabled, ironically, by Microsoft Internet Explorer, had an XML HTTP request, which allowed them to get XML off the server and turn it into HTML and update the page in place. jQuery came out about that. We had some jQuery people before, right? So jQuery was like the first big wow, because jQuery made it possible to build cross-platform apps, cross-browser apps without pulling your teeth out. Because before that, Microsoft's version of JavaScript was very different than the version of JavaScript shipping in other browsers. So if you wanted to support Internet Explorer, which had 95% of the market, and Firefox, you were host until things like jQuery came along. There were others, but jQuery was the big one. jQuery is still in widespread use today. We'll use it later. It's part of Bootstrap, and it really was an awesome thing. Gmail enters public beta. Gmail is important because it was the first app that proved that JavaScript could survive at the enterprise level, world level, really, web scale, world scale size JavaScript application. So it's JavaScript running in the browser. It's this big and most complicated thing that's been built to date. The interesting thing about that is they actually built JavaScript with Java. Now I know I said Java's not related to JavaScript, but the Google engineers used Java to build it, and then it would be transpiled down into JavaScript that would run in the browsers of that time. And that becomes a theme we see over and over again, and a really powerful one. Probably the biggest shift was in 2009, we had Node.js. Node.js is server-side JavaScript. It wasn't the first server-side JavaScript. They had JavaScript actually back in the Netscape days running on Netscape servers. But this was the first one that caught on. And the big reason is that it's wickedly fast and scales to ridiculous levels, all within a single thread. Once you go to multiple threads, you have all kinds of complexity that makes programming really, really hard. So Node is a single-threaded application like FileMaker is, but it's able to scale to web scale, in fact, to the point that in 2013, only 4 years later, Walmart, in the middle of their Black Friday sales, switches their entire mobile e-commerce platform from Java to Node, and nobody notices, including the people who are online at that time. By the next year, Node.js is running all of Walmart's e-commerce system. And this is repeated over and over in the industry. PayPal did the same thing. Lots of companies moved off these older legacy systems and switched to JavaScript and to Node. so it can scale. Things on the front end weren't stagnant at this time. We had lots of great user interface libraries that were being created, and the goal of these things was to be able to make things that looked more like applications and less like web pages. So they looked like apps, they behaved like apps, they weren't web pages. jQuery was a step in that direction, but it lacked a lot of the things that these other frameworks had to kind of polish and to finish it off, and especially when mobile got to be a big thing. There were lots of them. I'm just going to point out Ember and Angular because they're still around and still very big, and they were doing quite well. And then Facebook throws itself into the fray and releases React.js. React, it had a bunch of sort of controversial new ways of looking at things, and people at first were like, oh my God, that's terrible. And then a few months later, they all were like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And most of the big frameworks have now moved to, in some of the key ways that they build applications, are adopting some of the things that React brought to the table. Ecmascript 2015. JavaScript is actually a trademark name that's owned by Oracle. So it's not the real name of JavaScript. The real official name of JavaScript is Ecmascript. If Oracle ever chooses to enforce that trademark, maybe we'll start calling it Ecmascript all over the place, but it's commonly called JavaScript. So Ecmascript 2015 was specified and finalized last year. However, people were able to use it in the wild, in production, at web scale for a couple of years before that. And the reason is that JavaScript is so dynamic and flexible that you can write these compilers that let you, or transpilers in this case, that let you write modern JavaScript, and on the fly, in the background, without you doing anything, what comes out the other end and gets loaded into the browser is JavaScript that runs in that browser. And that's, even today, there are no major browsers that support all of the Ecmascript standard, but almost everybody who's writing anything new today is writing Ecmascript 2015. And that's what we're going to be writing. Even though the browser we'll be testing in won't have all those features. That is really interesting, because what it means is that JavaScript can evolve very, very rapidly, because as new features get proposed for the language, they have to go through a specification process. During that specification process, those features actually go into production in the wild using these tools like Babel and Webpack. And they get real feedback. And some features don't make it. Some features get tweaked. New features get added. So when the spec was finalized, every feature that was in there had already been in widespread use for 1 to 2 years. I just think that's so amazing, so fascinating. So JavaScript today runs at any scale on just about any device and in any kind of application. We think about it only only running web pages and servers maybe, but it also runs on little tiny microcomputers, Arduinos, Raspberry Pis. You can write JavaScript that produces native iOS or Android apps. Netflix writes JavaScript that produces the UI for all of their TV apps. They support like 200 different brands of TVs, so they have their own custom rendering engine. And what they write is React. They write React.js, and what spits out is not HTML, it's their custom renderer. So with JavaScript, you can reach any kind of UI, and you can reach any kind of device. The other thing that's really interesting and really important is that all of the trademarks and all of the intellectual property is either open source, in the case of all the code, or controlled by nonprofits in the case of the trademarks, the names, the logos, and the documentation and all that stuff. So there isn't any worry about some big corporation coming along and stepping on Node. It can't be done. It has a nonprofit organization that was modeled on the Linux Foundation, which has done really, really well. And it's supported by companies like Walmart and Microsoft and others. So we have millions of developers. We have the largest repository of free libraries available, and it is the de facto language of the internet and the coming Internet of Things. So why did I tell you all that? Pragmatic, community-driven evolution wins. Throughout JavaScript's 22-year history, people tried to kill it again and again and again and again in the name of we can do better than this crazy, goofy, deeply flawed language that shipped in 10 days. But JavaScript was already in the browsers. It couldn't be replaced, so people evolved it. And they did it through a community effort, and it wasn't always pretty. There were massive fights. Node was forked. Names were called. I mean, it was pretty awful. Within a year, they got back together, and it's a much better platform as a result of that. So This is something I don't think people appreciate. JavaScript is the only language currently today with native support across the entire FileMaker platform. Is that a surprise to everybody? Anybody? You all got that? Good. I didn't get it for like a long time. It's there. We have the web viewer, and the web viewer has a JavaScript engine, so every web viewer that you have on a layout can run JavaScript. And that works in WebDirect, that works in Pro, and that works in Go. No other programming language has that support from FileMaker today. And so you can see some of that in things like seed codes, dayback calendar. So Simple's here, they're using JavaScript. There's our two products, GoDraw and GoSign, are JavaScript apps running in web viewers that are on FileMaker layouts. There are plugins. Base Elements has a full JavaScript interpreter. MBS and Fusion Reactor can interact with the web viewer and run JavaScript. And so those have been out there for a while. But what hasn't been talked about a lot is custom web publishing. And that's really what I'm going to focus on today. So this is the insanity that I'm going to try to do. We're going to try to build everything that's in those green boxes there. So at the bottom where it says FileMaker Server, that's here running on my laptop. And we're going to build an HTTP server with Node that connects to that using the XML gateway. On that, we'll have a REST API that we'll add to that, and that will also include a WebSocket server. How many people are familiar with WebSockets? WebSockets is what is behind WebDirect's ability to update UIs when data changes. On all modern browsers anyway. In the older browsers, they fall back to polling. But in modern browsers, when data gets changed in a FileMaker database with WebDirect clients, WebSockets send out notifications to those connected clients so those clients can stay updated. So we're going to build all that right here, hopefully. And then we're going to connect a WebSocket client. It's standing in for any WebSocket client, but we're going to build a WebSocket client in JavaScript that'll run in the browser, and we're going to use React to do that, and we'll use Bootstrap just to do the theming. All right, here we go. Oh gosh. All right, so let's start with we'll make a new project here. So let's see, what's my time? Good. All right, so let me just start by saying you're going to see a lot of command line, a lot of text editing here. There will be errors. And when I first started doing this, errors scared me to death. I thought, oh my God, I blew everything up, and because it's all this gobbledygook, I don't know what it means. And I still don't know what a lot of it means, but you can usually pick it out, and it's sort of part of the development process with really any text-based language. You write it, you try it, it fails, it throws an error at you, and you keep doing that until there's no more errors, basically, is part of it. But I make this point because it's different, right? And sometimes it's hard to move from what we are used to doing to what we want to do or want to explore. And especially it gets harder. I think every year that I've gotten older, it's getting harder for me to start up with something new. But I started JavaScript just a few years ago in my mid-40s, and it's doable. So try to have an open mind and try to just try to follow along. You don't need to understand everything about how to do this stuff yourself. What I'm really trying to show is what the possibilities are, and I'm trying to show that it doesn't take very much code to do an amazing amount of stuff. That's the key thing. It does not take a lot of developer effort to do amazing things. And sometimes that's really important. Like if we had that big story last night about the medical ships, right? That was an awesome story. But without MirrorSync, it was one of my competitors, by the way, I thought that story was awesome. Without MirrorSync, that story doesn't work, right? So if you're in that situation, if you want to do that, you need to know that there are technologies out there that can do what MirrorSync did in that case, or do whatever it is. And my suggestion is that JavaScript is that technology. So we're going to create a new project, and let's call this server. Very exciting name. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to open up my terminal here. So I'm using WebStorm from JetBrains. Any WebStorm users out there? PHP Storm users? A few? I like theirs. You can use any IDE you want, any text editor you want. This is my particular favorite. I like it because it kind of has everything together. We have a terminal down here. We have our file system over here, and we're going to have our text editing right here. Okay? So I'm going to be doing a bunch of things in the terminal. So Node has this package management system called NPM. This is kind of like Ruby Gems for folks who've done Ruby. Same kind of thing. We're going to install. All I'm going to do at this point, though, is just init a Node project. And I'm just going to accept the defaults. But what this is going to do is create a package JSON for me. And package JSON is, believe it or not, JSON. So this is where all the metadata about your project, your Node project, is stored. This is also where all your dependencies will be linked in. And it's got a few other cool things like NPM scripts and a few things like that. But so that's pretty much how you start every Node project. I should mention that Node is available to install on Mac, Windows, and Linux with installers from nodejs.org. It's really simple. It's just an installer. You install it. Once you have it, you can start doing what I'm doing here. OK, so next, we are going to create a file called, again, really inventive, server.js. OK, there it is. All right, so we're going to start by building a basic web server. And I'm going to use common JS modules, which is a module system that works in Node. And I'm going to pull in the HTTP module from Node's common library. Then I'm going to create a server. And I do that by calling the, again, inventively named method createServer. Now, notice I'm using const, C-O-N-S-T. For those of you who've written a lot of JavaScript in the past, you're like, what's that? Well, it's a constant. This is one of the things that is new in the newer versions of JavaScript and was in widespread use long before it had browser support, which again, is really neat. So the server takes a handler, a request handler, and that handler is a function that is going to be called every time a request comes in. So web servers are basically, they sit there and they wait for a browser to make a GET request or a JSON client to make a POST request or whatever. And all we do is we're going to give it a function that is called whenever that thing is hit. And then we just have to turn on listen. And we'll say listen to port 3000. And I'm just going to do a function callback right here. And a callback, JavaScript is asynchronous. So lots of times when you do something, it's not going to return right away and get to the next line. You have to give it a callback. And that callback is a function that will run when whatever you just did is done. So when I say, hey, server, listen, at some point in the future, the server said, I'm listening. And when it does, it calls back this function. And I'm just going to say listening in the console. Now we've got to write our handler. So a handler is just a function. That's a function. It's an anonymous function. Well, it's an anonymous function that's assigned to a variable. And it's going to receive two parameters, a request parameter and a response parameter. The request represents the incoming request. The response represents the outgoing response that you're going to create as part of your function call. So what we're going to do is just use the response, and we're just going to do end hello. That's it. Now, so we're now going to do, down in the terminal down here, I'm doing node. I'm running a command line, node's command line, and I'm pointing it at the server.js file. And notice down here it says listening. Okay, so that means that we're listening. So if I go open up a browser and go to localhost 3000, we should see hello. All right? It's pretty nifty, huh? Look at that, 14 lines of code, and we have a web server. Pretty awesome. Let's see, I can blow up just the browser and make that bigger. So we can actually make it less than 14 lines. We'll do a couple things. One, we'll change this to an ES6 arrow function. Very similar to a function, less keystrokes. It is a function, less keystrokes, and it has a couple different characteristics which I won't get into here. And that will still work. So if I restart my server and refresh this, we'll still get hello. There we go. And I can get rid of this function altogether, and I can give the handler, I can give this to right there and do an inline callback. And that will also work. So under a dozen lines of code, and we have a web server. That's pretty nifty. Now, you could take this, and you could build routing on top of it. You could build a REST API on top of it. You could go to town. Right now, it doesn't do a lot, right? I mean, it doesn't matter what I put into this thing. I can put, this route, and it doesn't matter. It's always just going to return hello, because our handler function doesn't differentiate. It doesn't look at the path. It doesn't look at the query parameters. It just responds with a function. But you could look at you have the request object, so you could look at the incoming path parameters and the query parameters, and you could go and look up data in a database, and you could create some HTML and send it back to the browser. That's how you do it. We don't have to do any of that stuff. We're going to do something much simpler. We're going to download from I don't even know how many millions of packages there are in NPM. We're going to download Express. And we're going to do npm install express. What? But I was going to show that as an error, guys. Come on. npm install express, and I'm putting -save so it puts it in the package JSON, so that anytime I want to update my dependencies, I just do update, and all my dependencies are updated. So we do that. We're downloading from the internet the latest version of Express. Express is the most popular web framework for Node. A lot of things are built on top of Express, but Express is sort of the core layer. It abstracts some of the things that we would commonly have to do, so we don't have to work with the low-level HTTP module. All right, so Express. All right, so for Express, well, let me just show that in package JSON now, you see our dependencies, we have Express in here. So now this project depends on Express, and that's how dependencies are managed. When we want to update, we can just say update Express, and we can get the latest version down. So let's rewrite our web server a little bit here. So let's bring in, so we're going to use common.js modules to bring in Express. And then we're going to create an Express app by just calling Express as a function, which is how you do it. Now, app is very similar to server, and I can do that. And then I don't need that. And now I can do something a little more interesting. I can do app.get for a get request, and I can give it a path. In this case, I'll just give it the root path. And then I can give it a function here. And let's take our old function right out. Put that right there. And now I don't need that. So now I've got some garbage in here, right? So if I do this, let me restart, make sure I restart the server. We're listening. If I refresh this, what do you think is going to happen? Cannot get. The reason it can't get is because now I've said only respond to get requests at the root of the URL. So to do that, let's see, you probably can't see that. You see all this stuff I typed in there before? So if we get rid of that and we go to the root, we should get hello. Okay? So now we have routing. Very important if you want to build anything serious. We also have, let me just copy this, and we'll do another one here. We'll do hello, except this time what we'll do is we will use a named parameter in the path. And so what that is going to do is allow me to say equals request, the request object, the parameters on that request object, name. And so with that, every time we call, actually let me add one more route to that just to be a little more clear. So anytime we call hello and then somebody's name, this route is going to fire, and that last part will get stuck in the params object, which we can then use right here and say hello name. We'll restart the server. Oh, I said name. That's not very exciting, is it? Let's, Joe. Okay? So you can start to see how really quickly you can start building out logic into your routes. So you can imagine that you could create routes if you wanted to build a REST API that might look something like DB name, right? You could do name parameters, and then you could do layout, right? And now you could use those parameters to create a request to your FileMaker database and put back the right data. That's it. You can now write a REST API. You still don't have to do that. We've got other things that make it even easier. But that's really all there is to doing it. You have to do that work, but that's it. You make routes that respond. You make routes that respond to those requests. You use the data on those routes to go and do what you want to do, compile it back into the result you want to send back, and you send it back to the server. That's really all there is to it. Now, I want to do something here, a brief aside, because I think it's totally awesome, and I think it's just a point worth making. So I'm going to add what's called an npm start script here. And all this is going to do is, instead of having to call node server to start my server up, I'm going to give it a shortcut here that is node server.js right there. And then, so this is now, this is in a scripts key in my package.json, and it's a start key inside of there. So now all I need to do is just go npm start. And so you'll see this. That started the server. You'll see this node server projects will, almost any node project will have an npm start script. And that's the script that you run. You don't have to think about how I kick this thing up. You just run npm start. And you can always look in the package.json to see what that npm start script is doing. All right, now that we got that, here's what I think is totally awesome. So, okay, we built a server. Now we want to get it on the internet. It's going on the internet. It's on the internet. I just typed NOW, and NOW is a command called now. It comes from a company called Zeit, Zeit.co, and they have a service that allows you to put up anything on the web. Did I stop it? What did I do there? It should continue to run. Let me start over. We'll do it again. Okay, it says I'm up there. Copy to the clipboard. There we go. So it's installing on the cloud. Don't ask me where because I don't know. It's somewhere on the cloud. What they say is they actually spread it out over the entire world so that the server instance that is closest to you responds. So it's up there right now. And in fact, if you, that'll be hard for you to type in, but if you could type that into your web browser, you would get the response. That's our server. I can go, hello, Joe. Oh, undefined. What did I do? I don't know. Well, I'll leave that alone for now. But that is our server. Oh, maybe hello, Joe. We'll try one more time, and then we'll move on. This is undefined. I'll figure that out later. But anyway, this service will take any Node.js app and post it to the internet, and it'll make it readily available. Now, of course, you don't want that goofy custom, that URL. You could alias that to whatever your URL is, right? So you can really quickly create services that respond to HTTP requests. You can put them up on the web and connect them to your FileMaker server. And when you don't want them, you just stop using them. And that's all you got to do. No server, no operating system, no network, no nothing. Just now. Done. It's pretty cool, isn't it? It's pretty awesome. Okay. All right. So, next. We're done with this guy. Let's shut him down. I'm going to create a new server. And we're going to call this one sockets. So now we're going to get to stuff that I actually did. Anything that you saw before, that was just like, that's all like boilerplate you can find anywhere on the internet. Now we're going to get to some things that I actually created. So I took credit for all that, but it really wasn't any work of mine. That's mostly the Node.js getting started, frankly, and the Express getting started. All right, command 1. So, but now we're going to do something that, building on some other things people have done. So we're going to use an Express-based web framework called Feathers. Feathers takes Express and adds things like WebSockets, authentication, services, a whole bunch of stuff that I don't want to have to learn how to write. I just use Feathers. And I created an adapter for FileMaker called, again, really interesting name, Feathers-FileMaker. And so we're going to use that to connect our server to FileMaker. We do that by calling Feathers generate new. And it's going to ask me some questions here, sockets, description I'll leave blank. I'm going to do REST and real time. We're going to do WebSockets. We're going to cores will be enabled, and eventually I will get a pull request to these guys so that FileMaker shows up in this list. But you can choose your DB, or you can just write it by hand later, which is what we'll do. And you can choose the different kinds of authentication you want, like Facebook or GitHub, OAuth, or whatever. We're just going to use local. I'm going to mostly punt on the authentication part. We're not going to show any of that. It just gets in the way. But it can all be done with the stuff that I'm showing. So right now we're downloading Feathers, we're downloading Express, we're downloading everything we need to run this thing. And as soon as it's done, we'll be able to have a fully operational WebSocket server. And that, depending on the network here, there we go, we're done. So now, because the standard is pretty much to do npm start, I'm just going to try that. And it's going to tell me that I have an application running on localhost 3030. So let's do that. So let's get that scaled down right to 100%. So there's our Feathers server up. Okay? Now it's not connected to FileMaker yet, but it is a fully functional WebSocket REST API for any database that we want. So now we're just going to connect it to FileMaker. And I have to do that, I got to install npm install feathers-FileMaker. So I made this module. I published it in the repository at npm. And now you could just do this to download it. So there that goes. And what this is doing, what this allows, this basically provides an abstraction layer between the way Feathers does things and the way FileMaker does things. So I'm handling the XML and I'm turning it into JSON and all that stuff. So I just made a compatibility layer around it. So you can use FileMaker the same way that you would use any other Feathers database. So you can actually, eventually, if you wanted to, you could change databases out. It's got a really great abstraction layer. So you can do that, and that's great because if you want to learn Feathers really well, you can use all of their documentation, and there's a lot. They have great documentation, and it will all work with FileMaker if you use the Feathers FileMaker way. We have another way that's a little simpler and easier to get started with, so that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to open up the Feathers app, and again, this is Express, but just with everything in it that you don't want to have to do yourself. So it looks a little bit like, oh my gosh, what is all that stuff? But it's really just the things like it's the WebSocket connections, it's the, it handles static files, so it loads files from the file system. It does the REST stuff. It does cores, so you can reach data from different domains, compression, favicons, little things that show up in the top. So those are all just added in. You can see those all there. And then down, so these are all being pulled in. And then down here, they're just, it's just like we made an Express app, we're making a Feathers app. And then we're configuring it. And we have to just add our FileMaker stuff. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in FileMaker. And I'm just going to call it FMS, require. And we should get Feathers FileMaker to pop up there. There we go. And then to use this shortcut, we want to make we get something called auto service. And auto service will automatically generate the REST API for the whole server and a WebSocket server. And that's pretty easy to get. You just go auto service. That's that. Now, we're going to need a connection. We're going to need to tell our server where our FileMaker database is, right? So we're going to create a connection object, and that is just constant connection, and it's just it's just a JavaScript object. It has a few properties you need, host being the first one, and that is going to be localhost. And it's going to be our, yeah, that's it, localhost. And then here, we're going to give it a default database. And I'm going to use tasks for that. You can override the database when you're making a request, obviously, but this just takes a default. And then we'll give it a username and password so we cannot deal with authentication during this demo. Okay, so that is that. So we've got everything we need. We just need to hook it in. We go. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you don't need it. It's a big, huge battle. Look up semicolon fight. Seriously, it's insane. It's not required, but a lot of linters will show that there. And so a linter is a code quality tool. You can see it's kind of showing me that gray box. That's my IDE telling me, hey, you might want to put a semicolon. It's not required, though. It would still work. But the fights over that are quite entertaining. So we configure we configure our auto service by basically just chaining this in with configure. And I'm doing it right before the last one because the last one is handles our errors. And we want to get this in there before the errors happen. So then we just do auto service. Auto service takes our connection object, and it looks like this. Connection is the object, and the value is this. Now, since this is ES6, one of the things about ES6 is if your property and value are the same, you can get rid of the value. So that's the same thing. So now we've told our Feather service that FileMaker is where it is and what it should do. So let's start it up and let's see what happens. Okay, so now we're just going to use the browser to test this. This should be fun. So the auto service creates routes for us on the auto prefix. You can change that prefix with additional configurations if you want. But then you see it knows I've been here. So tasks would be the database, and API tasks is the layout that we're using, that we're connecting to. So if I hit that, we should get a bunch of, What did I do? It's probably something up here. Line 26? No. No. This is kind of a problem. I need this. Let's see. I'm not seeing an error here. Here's an error. Let's see what the error says. Oh, yeah, this is one of those demo tasks. Demo is right. Oh, no. It's not semicolons. I wish. I know what, I can tell kind of what this error is, but I'm not seeing why we're getting this error.
Double quotes on line 21.
Double quotes on line 21. Doesn't matter, but yes. It's something to do with this. What have I missed here? User demo pass, localhost. Oh, this is, and the funny thing is I have copies of everything ready to go, except this piece. No, I don't. I've got it. Oh, I've got one here that works. Thank God. Okay. So we're just I'm gonna quit this right here. Whoo! Okay. I'm gonna pull this other one out of the trash, and this one was working earlier, so it should work. I don't know. I missed something, and I don't want to spend the time looking for it. We got lots of other stuff to cover. Before I do that, let me just say sockets. And we'll go in here, drop that in the desktop, and we should just be able to open this back up. All right, so this guy, let's try him, npm start. That's all good, and go to, oh, you know what I didn't check? It's kind of funny. I didn't check if the database is open. That would be good, huh? Haha, look at it. All right. I came in here 45 minutes early, which was far too long, apparently. I had all this time to set up, and I just didn't. Oh, man. I was having some issues with my server not restarting earlier. I really hope that's not it, or we're going to have a very short rest of the session here. Oh, boy. Let's see. What can we do to get around this one? We can try. I wasn't having any luck with that either. FMS admin, start. FMS admin, start. Start server, right? Or, I may have this running on another server. Yeah, no. Not that. But I think we can make this work. What I'll do is I will share that file up to my other server here. And let me go grab that file out, FileMaker Server. Oh yeah, this will make you old. Databases, tasks, give me that. Browse up. Awesome. No password. I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. Maybe not. Maybe not. Manage sharing, upload to FileMaker Server. Next. Okay. Come on, network. Okay, open in FileMaker Pro. Let's get that open. All right. So that is up. Yay. Okay. So that's there. So now we just need that URL, which was, I can find that this way. Nope. Dev FM, that's it, right? Yep, there it is. Okay. Now, so this will probably be a little slower, but it should still work. So we can add that here, except where to go. All right, let's try it again. See if I pulled it off. I really need this one to work. Says it's running. That's running. Yes! Oh boy. I'm beginning to regret that I haven't had a drink in over 20 years. 44 minutes to go. All right. Okay, I think we're good. So I'm going to assert just a couple things here. You can see that we're getting back JSON. That is a full REST server. You can make post requests, get requests, delete requests, put, patch. All that will work. We're also going to try and get this to work with WebSockets, and that's already running. So that server is up and running. It's running on my desktop, and we're now just going to close it. Not close it, but just put it away and move on to the next exciting chapter in what we're doing here. So I'm now going to create the front end. And so one of the things about React is that because it's using all this modern JavaScript, we need to set up a nice, good development environment. And luckily, there's a tool called NWB that does this for us. There's lots of them. This is the one that I'm using. I kind of like it. So I'm going to just CD to the desktop, change my directory to the desktop. And we're going to, we're going to get there. And then I'm going to go NWB, I think it's new, but we'll find out. New React app, and then I give it a name, which I'll call it ftasks. And then I'm going to use a specific version of React, which I can do by just simply going that. And that's now going to build us a React development environment. What's a development environment for a front-end thing? Well, I mean, you'll see. Some of the stuff that's really cool about this is, so let me open up WebStorm. I can close that now. Open up WebStorm. And the modern development environment is not the same as it used to be for writing web apps, which essentially was I write a bunch of text, I go over to my browser, I hit refresh, I wait. Ah, darn. I write a bunch of text, go to my browser, hit refresh, wait. That's how it used to be done, but it doesn't have to be done that way. And so we're not going to do it that way. We'll do it using some modern tools. So ftasks on the desktop, that should be it. Let's open it. Here it is. Let's look at just what it's created for us. It's created a bunch of folders, public source tests, which is it's got a full test suite generation built in. We're going to ignore that. Public is where we put our public assets like JavaScript and JavaScript libraries like jQuery that we're not going to bundle into our app, and CSS and things like that. And then our source starts with this index.html, which is the template for the app. That's just the scaffolding. And then our JavaScript app is going to get it inserted into that. So let's see if that works. And we'll just, again, we're going to go npm start, because that's how you start these things. And it says, yay, we have a server running on localhost. Let's go look at that. There it is. Well, that's exciting, huh? Welcome to React. So React has this, this design concept or this design language called JSX. And it looks like this. So this is the main app component in our application so far, which has nothing but an H2 that says welcome to React. You can look at that. See, that's JavaScript and HTML all mixed up together. Well, that was one of the things that people went, you can't do that when React came out. And now people love it because it really actually makes a lot of sense. It looks like HTML. It gets compiled into JavaScript, which then creates HTML. And you don't have to care about any of that. It just works. So that produces pretty much what you'd expect, a div and an H2 and another and an H2. This development environment that we're working has some really cool advantages. Like I can just change it when I save. I didn't refresh that browser. Can you see that? So when I edit and save, it changes. Okay, so that cycle of waiting to see is much reduced. I don't have to do anything. I write the file that we saw, the Babel and that thing called Webpack. Well, they are watching my source, the source, everything in that source directory. And when a file changes, it takes everything in there, takes the ES6, the modern JavaScript, compiles it to normal JavaScript, spits it out, and injects it into that web page. And again, I didn't have to do any of that. It just works. So I can just stand back and build my app. So next thing I want to do is I want to bring in Bootstrap. So I'm going to bring in, not import, npm install, what do I got? 49 minutes. We're going to make it. npm install Bootstrap. No, we're going to do React Bootstrap. And we'll -- save. So Bootstrap is a great front-end framework from Twitter. People have ported it to React to make it a little bit easier to use within the React ecosystem. I'm going to do that and install that. And while we're doing that, I'm going to grab from my assets folder, I've got all the Bootstrap stuff I need right here. I'm just going to drag it into public. And so that is now in the public folder. And then the other thing I need to do is I need to update my index.html. And so I'm going to cheat and just copy that so I don't have to type long URLs. But really, all I'm doing is, so this is our index.html now, and I'm just going to add the links to Bootstrap and the Bootstrap style sheet and jQuery. Okay, that's it. That's all I'm really doing there. So now we have Bootstrap involved, and if I do npm start, we'll see our styles will change a little bit. Yeah, we get this big sort of, wow, kind of ugly thing. But we can start to work with that. So Bootstrap likes to have a class. Now this is like HTML. I can put a class on here. We do need to use the DOM property, which isn't class, it's class name. Just think that in JSX you use class name instead of class. But I can set that property to be container, and my ID is really good. It reads the CSS and I know the properties are right there and I can just hit it. And now it'll get a little easier. All right. So this is React. This is a very simple example of it, and you can see kind of what it starts to do. You can create these components that are made out of, that looks a lot like HTML, and you can use these properties on the their attributes, like HTML attributes, as parameters to those functions, to those what end up being functions, but end up being showing up on your web page. So I'm going to, because of that little hiccup before, I'm going to open up another version of this that's a little further along so we can see how that's all working. But again, the thing to note there is that I used NWB to create this environment. I downloaded, installed a few other things, and I've got this environment that lets me do React without having to worry about all the setup or configuration or any of that stuff. So now let's go close that one. I need out of my JavaScript stages client. We'll do this one. So this is pretty much the same example, but I have created a bunch of custom components that we can use to build an application. And one of these custom components connects to FileMaker. So let's see. I actually want to do this. How do I want to do this? I want to do this way. Let me just delete this old one. And there's an FTAS in here that I want. That's what I want. I want you out here on the desktop. OK. And now I can just open you up. All right. So we've still got some things here. We've added a few other things. But down here was what we were looking at before. Now you see I've added a couple of other things. We have this header here. Now header is not an HTML. Actually, I think header might be. But capital H is not an HTML tag. And so React dictates between standard HTML and HTML tags that you write by having a capital letter. So this one I wrote. Here it is. So here's some more JSX. You can see that this is a collection of divs. And those navbar things are React Bootstrap custom HTML tags that React Bootstrap provides to us. So this is pretty simple to write. But now I have this very modular thing that I can ship around, put anywhere in my app, and I can use it, reuse it over and over again. Notice right here that I have this props label. What that is every React component gets a props object on the this object that you have inside of JavaScript, inside of components like this. And anything that's on that props object is the stuff that gets put on the attribute. So if we look in our app, you can see header. I have the label. Oh, let's start this up. Let's do that so we can see. Terminal npm start. And let's get rid of that and that and that. And do Chrome and localhost 3000, not 3030. So that's kind of what it looks like now. So we've added a few things to it. But so look at this DevCon thing, right? So this is in our header. It's got the label of DevCon 2017. I added that as an attribute to the class here. So I can change that. I can say, instead of DevCon, I don't know why I said 2017 there, but whatever. Let's do DevCon is awesome. It's rebuilding, and it just refreshes automatically in the page. So by creating this component creates what you can think of as custom HTML tags that you can use in the rest of your application, including you can define attributes that you put on those custom HTML tags wherever you use it in your solution. So that's relatively boring. Let's do something a little more exciting. So I created a component that is already imported into here called fmFind. Anybody want to guess what that might do? So again, once these components are available, you don't really have to know how they work under the hood. You just have to know what attributes to give them so that they do what they're supposed to do. But you don't have to know under the hood how I created the WebSocket connection to the server, any of that stuff. What you need to know is how to use fmFind. And you can do that. Good IDEs can actually help you with that because they get information on, whoops, that's not it. It should tell me, what is it? Is it FM? No, it is fmFind. Maybe I have to do it this way. There it is. There. So my ID knew, because I defined attributes for this custom tag, I defined a host, a DB, a layout, and a result component. It also needs an error component, which we'll get to right now. So we got to put in localhost, and we need the port, which is 3030. So this is that WebSocket server we wrote just a minute ago. Okay? The DB is the same as we've been using. Tasks, the layout, the same as we've been using. API, tasks. You can, and I often do, like I'll break these down onto individual lines. It's a little bit easier to see. So this actually takes two more things. It takes an error component, which I didn't finish configuring, or it would have shown up here, but error component. And so these are other components that I've written and imported into this page. So they're all up here. So what we're going to use is what this find will do is right now there's no find on it, so it's just going to find all the records in that database. And then it's going to use the result component to display the records that were in that interface. So this FM find could be used with any kind of list that you want to develop. It will work with it because it just hands the data it gets from the database to the next attribute, to that result component, and the result component takes over and finishes the process. So it's sortable result list is the name of the one we want to use. So we're going to plop that in here. And then the error one is just error. All right. The wrong what? Port? No, this is 3000. The server should be 3030. I'm not running the server. That shouldn't matter because the server that I'm running is the socket one right here. But I closed it. I must have closed it because it's not up here. Let's see. I only have the one. Now I've got it open, so I just need to go npm start here. So that's the 3030. So that's the WebSocket server it's running on my computer, but it is talking to the database up in the cloud. All right, this better work. Yay, here we go. Okay. Now I'm going to do two things. So we have like an edit panel here. We can edit data. This is kind of big. Let me see if I can stretch this out a little bit. Wow, is the screen smaller? I guess that's about the same. So we can do editing with these really nice interfaces. The one thing that I want to show, though, I feel like my screen is smaller than normal, but I guess we'll figure it out. Oh, you know what? Did I do actual size here? Oh, there we go. That's better. Okay. So check this out, right? We can go new tab, and let's grab 3000, and we'll put it over here. So we've got two copies of that application running, and let's take the first task and sort it to the top. First task, okay? All right, so I have one last trick, and then we're going to go to questions. So again, we're using Bootstrap. Bootstrap provides a lot of these components, so I don't have to build them. Like this thing here, this object we're dragging, this is a Bootstrap panel. I didn't write this. What I did was I extended it and created one specific for my application that accepts FileMaker data. I'm saying it's all I did. Like it's not that hard. But the point is that other people can do this for you. If this isn't something you want to do, other people can do this. And there are 1 million JavaScript developers out there. And they can build these components for you, which you could assemble. And again, look at the level of complexity here. This is really where the app is described, right there. We have a header, we have a page label. That's the header, that's the page label. And then we have our find, and inside that we have our result component is a sortable list, right? So once I have the components, assembling these into an application is relatively easy. And it's, again, something that you can hire somebody else to do. So I want to do one last thing, and that is in my index.html, I'm going to change this theme to just another theme that is blatantly different. Refresh. And I get a completely different look, but I get exactly the same behavior. Okay? Bootstrap has thousands and thousands of themes. There are places to make them. There's UIs to make them. At the end of the process, you download a theme.min.css file. You change out the theme file, you get a switch from that dramatic, and it can be all over the map from really hideously ugly to really beautiful. So let me see if there's anything else I wanted to talk on. I guess that's There's more things to do, but I think we've covered everything that I wanted to, and considering we had that mishap in the middle, I think I'm going to stop right there and just take some questions. There's a microphone in the back there. It's probably the best way to go. Yes?
So this is really great with the Bootstrap drag and drop sorting, but what if I use the Foundation CSS framework? Is it easy to just drop any other framework in for CSS instead of Bootstrap?
Yes, so some people have taken Bootstrap and ported it to React to make it easier, but you actually don't need to do that. You can just use, because React is just writing HTML, that you can just put the classes on the stuff the way that you want, and you could write your own Foundation components really easily if you wanted to. There may be a Foundation React component already out there and set, and you can go and check it out.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So great stuff, really exciting. I'm curious, can you show how, and maybe this is beyond the time we have for now, but to find related records or some of those FileMaker functionalities, how easy or how difficult is that with this platform?
So it's actually, I can't really show anything because I don't have any related records demos up there, but the one way with Feathers FileMaker, the thing that I wrote, differs from other databases is that if there's a portal on the layout you're targeting, you get that data back. So that would come along with the rest of the data that comes down for that layout. You can also do finds. So the Feathers framework that I'm using to do this has a query language. It's really simple. And you can use that, and it will do the finds on FileMaker and return those results. So yeah, it's not too tough.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Here comes somebody, yeah.
So is this available on FileMaker right now?
Everything that I showed you today is using current FileMaker. I'm not the only person to put out JSON APIs. There's a PHP version from the guys at Goya. There's others. But as far as I know, I'm the only one who's done a WebSocket API for FileMaker. And I think that's the real exciting point. But that's available today. All this stuff will be available as soon as I can get it up. And once, I don't know if I can get it done tonight or tomorrow, but sometime the next week, all this will be on GitHub. And I intend to continue to produce those components. So we'll get other things like not just a FileMaker find, but a FileMaker record or a FileMaker script, or having those tags that you can just drop into your page and attach to buttons or other elements of the HTML. It feels to me a lot like CDML. Who here remembers CDML? Remember that tag-based language and how nice that was? React feels to me like that because I can abstract away those things into those what look to me like CDML tags, So I love it. In fact, maybe I'll release a library. It's CDML, just for fun. We'll have to come up with a different name than Claris, though. Like, I don't know what we'll call it. Something. Anyway. Yeah. So are there any more questions?
Sure.
Yeah, so way back there.
Could you talk briefly, I know it's a deep topic, but making the leap after we've done some experimenting with this to having confidence in what we've created in terms of reliability and security?
Yeah, so I didn't talk about the security at all, but both the framework, that's the older framework I used to use. The Feathers FileMaker supports basic authentication and JSON Web Tokens, which is a newer, modern way of doing authentication. And then you can use any of those OAuth providers like Google and GitHub and everybody to actually do your authentication. And then your authorization we built into the logic of the app that you build. Now, of course, that all lies on top of FileMaker, and somewhere in there, you can override the username and password at various levels in the system to use different accounts. And so any access level privileges that you have set up for those different accounts will, of course, be respected. So we're not getting around FileMaker security in any way. I just kind of punted on the whole topic for this. As far as like building up confidence, there are a ton of JavaScript resources out there. I will list a whole bunch in a follow-up to this, some of the ones that I use, but there are just tons and tons and tons and tons. And I mean, everywhere you look. I'm sure lynda.com, they were here last night. I know they got tons of JavaScript stuff. It's all over the place. It does take some time, and I don't want to stand up here and say it's super, super easy. You're just going to fall right into it. It's all going to work. It takes some time. If you've not done text-based code editing before, it's a little bit hard to get used to. At least I found it so. But I also found that there's a lot of nice things about it that I like. And I love being able to build these components and these things that I can make easily available for other people to use or for me to use later on down the road. And so that, at the end of the day, that was the impetus that got me to sort of get through my initial fear of the command line and text editors. I have a really great one for command lines. Think of the command line as if you're text messaging your operating system and your apps, because that's really what it is. You're just texting. That's it. And if it's just texting, it's not bad. You won't, you're not going to kill it. Just don't send any weird pictures or anything, and you'll be fine. Yeah, a question back there. Yeah.
Could you just briefly recap? I think I kind of missed the React portion. Is that useful for things other than just development? So it's cool that you can code it and then see it right away? Oh,
so that see it right away thing is not specific to React. Most of the modern frameworks have all that tooling built in. It's modern. That's what I would call a modern JavaScript stack. So you can run some command lines, and it starts watching your file system, and it'll reboot and inject the code live into the app as it's running. So you get this refresh and auto reload. So that's not specific to React. That's
okay,
everywhere.
So it's really that REST API that when you resort in the web viewer, it resorts in FileMaker.
So the REST API. So we had two different servers and two different applications, and they could be on different continents. It didn't matter, right? We had the REST API, the WebSocket server. They happen to both be running on my machine, but they don't have to be. And they communicate over HTTP or WebSockets. But the sorting that was going on and that refreshing that was happening, that was all JavaScript happening in the client. It was using a WebSocket connection to say, hey, I'm changing the sort, change it on the server. The server did that and just responds, I did it or not. And if it responds with OK, then the sort takes. If it doesn't, it automatically kicks back to where it was. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, so I guess I'm just trying to get clear which pieces of that were the React pieces.
So the React piece, so React is about building front-end interfaces. So the stuff that we're showing here, this is all React, okay? And on the code, I closed WebStorm already. The code was that stuff that looked like HTML. That's React.
Okay.
And pretty much everything else was other stuff.
Okay.
But that was React.
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
We got a couple more minutes. Anybody? Yeah.
When you change things inside FileMaker, does it also pushes it out to the web browser or not? Like
It can. I ran out of time, but I do have that working. I can show it to you if you come by the booth maybe later. The way it does it, though, is it uses a script trigger to contact the REST API. So see, the way that WebSocket server works is anything that goes through, any changes that go through the WebSocket server or the REST API will update all connected clients, okay? So what I basically do is just send a simple HTTP request to the REST API and say, hey, this record updated. And so that sends a change notification out to all the connected clients, and they get the new data. And they sort or they change their values, whatever. Okay. So yeah, but I would say at this point, it's a script trigger on a layout, change of data. So it's not a schema level trigger. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. One more. I'll try to get you guys if they're both quick, but we got to get out of here for the next people.
Real quickly, I am not worthy. Thank you for your leadership and innovation. That was the most amazing turducken I've seen in a presentation. You say that this is extremely scalable.
Yeah.
At what point does the FileMaker server become an issue, and then you, oh my gosh, might go to a different server?
It depends a lot on the conditions of the application, but you can go very, very high because a lot of the processing is not happening on the server. The server is only dealing with those web requests. And it's also not having to update the other clients, right? That socket server, which is managing all the client communication, it's dealing with all that. All FileMaker server is getting is a notification when data changes. That's all it's getting. So it doesn't have to work quite so hard. I don't have any hard numbers on scalability, but custom web publishing in general can scale beyond what we can do with, say, WebDirect, certainly, and even with FileMaker Pro.
Thank you.
And I don't want to take a bunch of time, but I missed the part. So it's really nice that being able to use that to sort, but I missed it. Why is it sorting in FileMaker? Are you doing a callback to FileMaker?
Yeah, I'm just trying to show that the communication is happening in all places.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks very much. Come by the booth. And have a great show.